January 6th anniversary, second anniversary that is here. President Biden plans to have a ceremony in Washington, D.C., in White House, giving award to 12 people who are election worker or work on saving lives on January 6th, 2021. But none of that is in headlines. None of that, I don't see any other news about somebody marking the anniversary of January 6th or some great discussion about all of that. Republicans are still struggling to find a speaker for themselves, but in this meantime, they were able to remove metal detectors from the Congress. We have Daryl Johnson with us to discuss these issues about January 6th and right wing extremism. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you.
Daryl Johnson is former senior analyst at the Department of Homeland Security. He's also the author of Hateland, a long, hard look at America's extremist heart. Do you think, Daryl, another January 6th is possible?
Well, as you've seen since January 6th, the FBI and Justice Department have launched a massive investigation into the violence of that day. We've had over 900 people arrested to date, and they're still looking for more. So this has had somewhat of a deterrent effect. It's caused a lot of these groups to operate underground, which is equally concerning because we don't know what these people are chatting about, what they're plotting to do next. So just know that despite the Biden administration's attempt to send out this national strategy to combat domestic terrorism, this threat still remains a national security concern.
Do you think our law enforcement is this time ready if there is a need for support to the Capitol Police? Is the National Guard are ready? Have they done any rehearsals? Are the military willing to listen this time?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it took the events of January 6, 2020 to cause our legislators, law enforcement to finally recognize this threat for what it is. And so that was a lesson learned. And so this next go around, I think they'll be much more prepared because their mindset now realizes the full totality of this threat.
Uh, Tell me this. I don't see, as I mentioned, any news items other than President Biden and White House about the January 6th anniversary. Are people trying hard to forget about it? Why media is not paying attention to that?
Yeah, I can't answer why the media isn't paying attention to it. I mean, obviously, people in my line of work are aware of the anniversary date. And so there's been, quite a bit of law enforcement operations against these right-wing extremists since the January 6th insurrection. So hopefully, like I said, that's had a deterrent effect. But make no mistake, these groups still are operating underground as well as above ground, and we do see arrests and plots and people with weapons and ammunition being arrested practically every month.
So you mentioned it is difficult now to know since these people are hiding and using different mechanism. What mechanism are they using to communicate what government cannot look into?
Yes, so as the social media platforms like Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, and others have taken a crackdown on these groups and deplatforming them, some of them have migrated to other types of social media like 4chan and 8chan, and they even have their own types of communication networks that they've established themselves. So it's hard to monitor. And again, we're talking about people's freedom of speech, even though it's hateful and vile and anti-government. Law enforcement can't scrutinize that activity until it becomes criminal or threatening in nature.
Well, when it comes to other types of extremism connected overseas, we're watching speech and conversation and tracking that, or sometime entrapping people. Is any of that happening in this domestic terrorism situation?
Yes, so You point out a very good point, and that is people that have ties to international terrorist groups like Al Qaeda and ISIS, they lose some of their civil protections because they're linked to a designated foreign terrorist group. There is no list of domestic terrorist groups, and so it's much harder to delineate which people are endorsing violence or capable of carrying out violence and those who are just talking heated rhetoric. And so there's a delicate balance, and because of the strategy these domestic terrorists use, it makes it more difficult for the federal government, law enforcement, the Justice Department to look at the extremist chatter. And so that's why we have to rely on the private citizenry as well as private industry to, if you see something, say something. If you see something suspicious or you see something that doesn't look quite right, report that to the authorities. A classic example just happened last month where we had a young man showing up at a gun range dressed all in black, wearing a Kevlar military helmet, body armor, and was practicing speed loading and fast shooting. He was arrested on weapons violations, and they found out that he was actually plotting a mass shooting. So it was the owner of that gun range who noticed these odd behaviors that reported it to the FBI, and they were able to look into it and prevent an attack.
Now, private entities like yours, are they being engaged or in conversation with the federal government when it comes to right wing extremism?
Yeah, the federal government relies on a whole wide range of contacts, both in private industry, faith-based organizations, civil rights organizations, these social media uh, companies. So it's a wide network that they have to depend upon, build relationships of trust, so that they can kind of get a holistic approach, looking at different people's perspectives as well as the analytical threat assessments that each party brings to the table.
Do you think Department of Justice has done enough so their whatever charges and convictions they are getting will serve as a deterrent?
Well, they're taking a good step, but I'm afraid that some of these sentences aren't as harsh as they should be. So that may serve as a, kind of a, you know, sign that the government lacks the willpower to put these people in jail for a long time. But I do applaud those efforts. We've still got a lot of work to do. By no means is this threat mitigated. So we're going to be looking at this threat for the next few years past the 2024 election and beyond. So it's very important to remain vigilant and to continue to pull the resources together so that we can all combat this threat.
In a new Congress, Republicans have moved metal detectors. Do you think they will remain as sensitive to the security of congressperson? I mean, congressperson and senators, some of them were just a few feet away on January 6th, 2021. Do you think they will remain as concerned as the earlier, in Pelosi regime?
Well, the Republicans in particular, I think, bear responsibility for identifying, calling out this threat. I was a registered Republican for a very long time, and I've have the courage to come out and talk about this threat and call it out for what it is. We do have some members in Congress that are Republicans who are doing this, but I'm afraid there's many others that are actually coddling these groups and kind of playing into their conspiracy theories and some of the rhetoric that they have. And so the extremists, when they see that, they feel that they have the political support in Washington, and they feel that this is a more permissive environment for them to operate. So it's very important that both Democrats and, in particular, Republicans identify this threat and call it out for the violence that it's been linked to, and don't try to dismiss it as something that minimizes the threat, like it's a crazed gunman or someone snapping or the person's mentally ill or it's just a hate crime. If there's ideology that motivated the violence, it's terrorism, and we need to start calling it terrorism.
Do you think the GOP speaker, whoever that is, might be willing to openly condemn what happened January 6th?
I hope so. That's what it's going to take. Republican leadership, calling out the threat, identifying it, and condemning it.
Well, at this moment, there seems to be no plan in this chaotic situation at the House that how they intend to mark January 6th, which is just a few hours away.
Yeah, we
Thank
had
you
all
so
these
much.
hearings about the January 6th insurrection. A lot of information has come out from that, and hopefully, when they release the final report, we'll learn even more about it.
Thank you so much, Daryl Johnson, for your time. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.